That's another thing. £7,000 it costs for an average funeral. Well, all you have to do is watch daytime TV. It's so depressing because every single advert is over 50s life guarantee plan for when you're no longer here.
There's a brilliant one with some actress used to be 1 foot in the grave, where she's on the stage and she's going, "This is where it began for me, and this is where it'll end." Like Christ!
I don't care about my funeral.
Dead,
I'll be dead. You can roll me into the canal. It doesn't matter. I'll be dead.
Some lots of fun, but not mine, because I'll be gone.
Can we get on with this?
Where
is this conversation going?
Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Wednesday, the 16th of March 2016. And joining me on this edition are Assistant Editor Steve Withers.
Stop! I'm going to pee!
News Editor Mark Hodgkinson.
There is now a level 0.
And Audio Reviewer Ed Selley.
You'll never be the Dragon Warrior unless you lose £500 and brush your teeth.
So, welcome back to the podcast. We've got lots to get through this week. Lots of news broke last week. Lots of launch event stuff to talk about, and lots of death to talk about as well. Just to raise the tone of the podcast, we will be talking about the death of things on this edition. So, let's start on a bright note, and then it can go downhill from there. Samsung launched their new. Actually, I've got to do competitions. Dear me, I forgot all about that. And it's in the running order as well. So competitions, current competitions. What can we win, Steve?
You can currently win The Warriors on Blu-ray. I don't know if you've seen the film, but I actually quite like The Warriors. It's about basically a gang trying to get across the streets of New York. Late 70s, I think it was made. Again, with other gangs trying to kill them. But it's quite good fun. There's a famous line with "Warriors come out to play."
That's not what I remember.
What are you thinking of?
Don't fudge with the Wongs.
Oh, yeah, don't fudge with the Ducky Boys or something, isn't it?
I thought it was the Wongs.
Yeah, you're right, the Wongs, yeah. There's lots of different gangs and they've got different names. I think the Wongs are obviously the Asian gang. Directed by Walter Hill, I think. So there you go. That's available to win on Blu-ray to active members, and that competition ends on the 4th of April. And we got some previous competition winners. Mo3733 won Bullet on Blu-ray. And I like to thank John Best for his description of the plot of the film, which I think was pretty much bang on the money in the thread from last week's podcast. And also Sanjay and Pete FMB have won tickets to see Game of Thrones episode Hard Home in Dolby Atmos. So that's excellent. Blu-ray also comes out this week.
Yeah, the won copies of that as well.
Did he win copies as well? Even better.
There you go. You see, it was worth entering that competition.
Yeah, that was a great competition win.
Right, like I said, before we go downhill and get all depressed and talking about death, Samsung have launched their new TV lineup. The main press event or press launch is this week, Steve, but you got an early look last week.
I did. Pop down to the QA labs near Bracknell and had a look at the new lineup. Well, I didn't get to see much of the new lineup. They only had a couple of actual models there, but they took me through the new lineup in a presentation. They actually had the KS9500 there to have a look at, which is this year's flagship model. Technically, there'll be another flagship model because they are actually doing an 8K TV. But, let's be honest, there's 110 inches, 8K TV is going to cost an arm and a leg, and they're not, even by their own admission, they're not expecting to sell too many of those. So the realistic flagship model is the KS9500. One screen size, it's 3 screen size, 65 inches, 78 inches, and 88 inches. Full array backlight. And all the bells and whistles that they're bringing on this year. Obviously, it's got quantum dots, so wider color space, HDR support, at least 1,000 nits of peak brightness, HDR10 support, and their new revised smart platform, new controller, auto detect. So when you plug in a device, it just detects it immediately, and you can control that using the universal remote control that comes with the TV. I've got to say, those features they showed me, and they did look really good. Really useful little features. I think some of those aspects and some of the aspects of the smart platform itself are very intuitive and customizable. I mean, even though let's be honest, it does look a little bit like WebOS, it does work and it looks quite good. And I mean, it places the emphasis on video on demand services and streaming services and catch-up services, and I think that's what people are using the smart platforms on their TVs for, so that makes sense. Picture quality look great. They've also got the moth eye filter on it, so reduces reflections. They reckon that the viewing angles are slightly better this year because of the quantum dot they're using this year instead of last year, and also their native black levels are slightly better and also slightly brighter because of the technology and the quantum dot technology they're using. So overall, it's I mean to a certain extent, and I think we said this after CES, Samsung, were coming out with some pretty good TV, really good TVs last year that were already pushing the envelope in terms of technology and their capabilities. Certainly the JS9500 from last year, that would have probably got premium UHD certification this year if you tested it, because it was already delivering most of those things in terms of color gamut and HDR. And so there was, there's not much further they can go really this year, but I think what they've done is they fine-tuned and improved it, and to deliver a really solid lineup of TVs. So you've got the KS9500 at the top, you've got the KS9000, which is the one with edge LED lighting. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same in terms of the feature set, but it has edge LED lighting rather than the full array backlight. Then you've got, after that, you've got the one complaint I would have is that unfortunately with the flagship model, there's no option for a flat screen. It is curved. But after that, they are offering flat screen options at each of the levels then. So you've got the curved KS9000, KS8000, that's flat, KS7500, curved, and the KS7000 flat. Now, all the KS range, those are the SUHD TVs, they all support HDR10 with a minimum of 1,000 nits of peak brightness. And they all have quantum dot and wider color gamut, etc. So they're kind of offering a very strong lineup across the entire KS range, and they're giving you the option of flat or curved, with the exception of the flagship, the KS9500. After that, they've got the KU6500, which is their sort of not quite entry level because it was a lower level than that, but certainly it's sort of the mid-range non-SUHD 4K TV. So there's a KU6500 that's curved, and there's also the KU6400, which is flat. And then the entry level 4K TV is the KU6300 curved or KU6000 flat. And they're coming in a lot of screen sizes too. So they're really covering, I mean, obviously there are a few full HD models, but it's really it's probably about Ultra HD, 4K, HDR across the entire range. Although only the SUHD models have the sort of 1,000 nits peak brightness. The rest of them have got what they call HDR Pro, which isn't as bright. But it's a strong lineup. It's a strong lineup, good, lots of screen sizes, and it's good that they're giving people a choice of curved or flat.
Well, just thinking about this, if the arch advocates of the curved screen are offering a significant quantity of flat screens in this lineup, does that mean that we might finally be free of what, let's face it, is another concept which has failed to excite the public's attention? Do you think this is the beginning of the end?
I can't speak for Samsung, but anecdotally from other manufacturers, they have all said that they've not been that successful. And a lot of them have dropped it this year. I don't think Panasonic are doing any curved screens, are they, Phil?
Nope.
So Panasonic have dropped it. I think Philips are doing one curved screen still this year, maybe not even that. I think maybe they're ditching it this year as well. Hasn't been a success. So certainly the other manufacturers don't seem to think it's been a success.
I can't think of Sony either, can you?
No, I don't think Sony. No, you're right. So Sony have got one, but they've only got one. So really, they're either paying lip service to it or they've ditched it entirely. Now, there would be an enormous loss of face from the point of view of Samsung if they just said, no, it's been a failure. But I could imagine it being quietly phased out over time.
well, the fact that 50% of the range is flat this year that's more than being quiet, to be honest.
Yeah. It's just a shame that they're not doing a flat KS9500 because I think that would be, really popular with the enthusiast.
They are still trying to infer that the curved ones are slightly better, aren't they, with the higher product code numbers, even though they're the same TV, the 7.
Yeah, all the features are identical. Other than the only thing missing on the flat ones is the auto depth enhancer, which is a feature designed specifically to work with the curved screen. Yeah.
Any indication on pricing?
No, not yet.
Did you get to watch anything on them?
Yeah, I did. I got to watch. I tell you what, I've got to say the 9500 looked great. I watched a whole load of HDR content and 4K content and some various test pans, and it all looked really impressive. What was very impressive was they were showing the 9000, the KS9000, against last year's JS9000, and the addition of the moth eye and the new quantum dot technology they put into the TV really does make a difference. I mean, in terms of the black levels and that, there was a noticeable difference between the two panels, which I thought was quite impressive. So I think the KS9000 could be quite a strong range for them this year because obviously it would be cheaper than the full array backlight. And as long as they can make sure, and it looked, certainly on the panel they had in the demo, it was a nice even backlight. There was no obvious clouding or bright corners, edges or anything like that. I remember the moth eye was on a Philips TV about 3 years ago, and I thought it was great. It worked really well, and I was really surprised that nobody else used it. Even Philips themselves kind of quietly dropped it, I think, because at the time it was quite expensive. But if Samsung have got a way of doing it at a reasonable cost price, then I think that's a really cool addition to their lineup in terms of. Because, I mean, most people, I think it's realistic to say, most people don't watch TV in a pitch black room. The majority of people watch TV with some ambient light or during the day. So I think that's a really nice feature.
Right. So smart TV wise, like we said, it's very similar to the Korean neighbours, which isn't a bad thing because it's actually quite an intuitive system to use. But there has been a lot of talk this past week about smart TV services and making purchases on what basically is third-party providers' content on TVs from the likes of Netflix and Amazon and so on, and also how manufacturers are dealing with that. So we've had an episode in the last week where Panasonic servers went down, which caused a lot of issues with third-party services and at the App Store and getting stuff from apps. And we've also had the announcement from Microsoft that Skype that they're now going to take it off smart TVs because it hasn't been successful and they would rather concentrate on mobile smart devices and tablets and so on. So that kind of calls into question, if you're buying a smart TV, how much do you put on the smart stuff that you're actually buying into? Because it could be 2 years down the line it quietly gets dropped.
I'm more of a standalone kind of guy. I prefer a box you can plug in and move around, and you probably, you're more likely for it to be supported a few years down the line than the TV manufacturers if they suddenly change their smart TV system altogether. Then, as we saw when Samsung did it, there was loads of apps not working for a good period of time, nearly a year, with some of the key apps before they managed to switch over to Tizen. So I'd be wary of making any decisions on smart TV platforms.
In the demo they gave me on last Monday, there wasn't any catch-up services yet. I think they are coming, but they weren't actually on the platform yet. Although, in fairness, I guess the TVs haven't started shipping yet. But it took them quite a long time last year to get everything in order, didn't it?
Yeah, well, there wasn't just Samsung. I mean, you have to look at Sony and Philips with the Android platform and how many issues they had. Although, saying that, that put a downer on the TVs last year, but actually when you look at Android stuff now, Mark, that is the one platform where you can actually sideload and customize it to your heart's content, and you're not necessarily. It's
easily the most open, Phil. Yeah, without a doubt, you can do a lot of stuff. I mean, providing you can control the app. That is, I mean, if it's a touchscreen interface, you're gonna struggle with a TV remote. But there's plenty of stuff you can sideload. I mean, you can get really good. You can get Kodi on there from the App Store, in fact, which is a damn sight better media server than you'll find built into any of the TVs without a question. So Android's good in a lot of ways, and Google have opened up the API now, so released a new API to developers, which makes it a lot easier for audio visual stuff to happen, as it were. It'd be interesting to see what Sony and Philips, how they fare this year on the smart platform. I'm expecting it to be a lot better.
Maybe I'm old fashioned, but it's not something, if I was going out to buy a TV, I would be looking at. I think if I was looking at buying a TV, there are other factors that are way above the smart TV platform. And at the end of the day, the only things I'd be looking for, if it's a 4K UHD TV, all singing, all dancing, is Netflix 4K and Amazon 4K, as long as it had those services and YouTube, I suppose.
And maybe iPlayer, but you can get that anywhere, can't you, really?
Those would keep me happy, and anything else I couldn't care less if it has a browser on it or any other applications or games or anything like that, because I've got other devices that, should that take my interest, then I've got other things to go and play games on and that kind of thing. I'm not going to do it on my TV. And I think, Steve, we said for a number of years that TV's a laid back. It's not a sit forward experience like the internet is. It's a sit back and let stuff wash over you. And a lot of the smart stuff, it sounds interesting, but we actually put it into a TV, and so how much of it actually gets used, it's going to be video on demand, and I think that's about it. Yeah,
and I think the manufacturers have realised that. I think when they first started doing smart TV, they were trying to provide you with an experience that was similar to what you'd get from a tablet or from a computer. And as you just said, Phil, that's not what a TV is about. A TV is largely a passive experience. You sit back, you watch TV. It's a watching thing. You're not interacting with the TV that much, and you don't really want to. And what they've realised over the last few years is that the only things, because obviously I suppose they must monitor. If they can, they monitor what's being watched and used on these platforms, and they can see that what's being used, quite obviously, on the catch-up services and video on demand like Netflix and Amazon. So those are the things that are being given priority. And if Samsung's newly designed platform is anything to go by, they clearly realize that, because it's much simpler. It's very much focused upon content, getting you content, finding content, recommending content, and the rest of it's very much in the back. There's stuff that, like web browser, that kind of thing, is still there, but I mean, no one's using it. What they're emphasizing is video on demand and accessing video content, because that's what you use a TV for watching things. And yeah, I think that's definitely, it's been a learning curve, because obviously when you can do something, you want to try and show off and say, oh, we can do all these things. But you quickly realize that people aren't using the TV for Skype conversations. They aren't using it to make Twitter, have Twitter conversations. They are, because you've got a device probably right next to you to do all that anyway, a tablet.
And much better
phone,
suited
whatever.
for it as well.
Yes, exactly. A lot easier, because obviously one of the big problems with the TV, even, with the Philips dual-sided remote controls, getting stuff into television is never that easy with a remote control either. You've got to start typing stuff in. So what you want to do is you want to just find content and watch it. And the easier they make that, and the more accessible, I think, the better. And that's pretty much what they've realised.
Yeah, obviously second screen and stuff as well is proven popular, but yeah, it's all about watching stuff. It's not about interacting with the TV as such. And I guess, Ed, as an outsider for something like this, because I know you've got a
Stranger.
I know you got a GT60, which hasn't got a hell of a lot of smart functionality about it. But if you were going out to buy a TV tomorrow, let's say it gave up the ghost and you really had to go out and buy something, where on your list of priorities does smart TV come?
A long way down. Put it like this, as you say, I've got a GT60. It's a very old lady in television terms. Even so, even if that's a limited smart TV, it's still chock-a-block with stuff I've never even selected. As you guys have said, it really needs to have Netflix, and that's as much actually for my wife as me. I actually find myself watching less and less of that. And yes, essentially, it needs to be able to deliver some content, and that's it. I mean, in terms of things that I would be selecting for, it comes down to picture, its ability to be accommodated in the space. I don't care what it sounds like. I suppose I'm actually sort of interested into whether it's got a reasonable control app, because remote controls don't do too well in my house at the moment. But no, it really hasn't been a big feature. But I don't know whether this is a generational thing. After all, we're all, to a greater or lesser extent, old people. So whether there's a sudden flick point below a certain age where it suddenly matters, I don't know. But I don't think that any of the TV manufacturers cutting back on what these things are doing at the moment, I don't think they're doing anything radical. I think they're responding to a perfectly legitimate trend that the vast majority of things packed into smart TV applications are never once selected or used.
So like 90% of the Skype TVs out there don't have a built-in camera, do they?
Well, that's the thing, you had to buy
it. It was only the flagship ones that ever had built-in cameras, so another £100 on a webcam? No thanks.
Yeah, I miss them. I miss the videos with Steve's finger going in and pushing the camera so it popped up. That was only dynamic.
The same shot.
It was the only dynamic bit of videoing that Steve ever did.
Oh, there you go. That's the downside of relentless technical innovation.
I mean, we've seen manufacturers' surveys for years, and generally, I'm not sure how honest this is sometimes, but generally, that number one criteria for people is picture quality. Actually, I saw a survey that Samsung showed me last Monday. And interestingly, that the number one criteria was price. I think that seems more realistic. That's got to be the number one criteria for everybody. Price.
Yeah, for the mass market, I think it is. Yeah, the other thing is, and again, I'm not having a go at our listeners. I would never ever do that. But we all tend to live in this little dome called AVForums and AV in general, and we're all enthusiasts, and we all like this technology and all the rest of it. And what we like and what we think is important very rarely transmits to the mass market in any kind of meaningful way. So it always surprised me when picture quality appeared at the top, because I don't think we were talking about the same thing when it came to picture quality between the mass market and the enthusiast market. It never seemed to ring true that way.
No, I mean, it'd be nice. I think people do place emphasis on picture quality, but based upon my anecdotal experience, that's not always the case.
Steve, I was a police officer for 10 years. I was in and out of people's houses, and I can guarantee you that there's absolutely some monstrosity of picture quality out there. And some of the times you turn up people's homes and you want to just grab the remote control and fix it there and then, because
before you break up the domestic assaults, you actually stop. Let me just fix your TV first. Wait a second. Stop hitting each other. Okay, that's arguing. Now we're in movie mode. What was it you were complaining about? But what is interesting is the things that were always, and I mean always, coming at the bottom of those surveys. And one of them was smart TV platforms. I don't think they ever massively popular. I can always remember seeing them being quite low down the list of priorities for people.
Yeah, because I think the likes of Netflix and Amazon and YouTube, that's not smart TV. Those are video players or video on demand services.
Yeah, it's kind of like a channel these days, isn't it? That's a channel on your television, effectively.
Yeah, it is not a smart TV. Like you say, it's a channel, it's an app, but it's for content delivery. It's not for playing games and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I think moving on, and this is me making another prediction here, which is no doubt going to get me into trouble like the last few have been, and we're going to come on to one of those in a minute, so I can say I told you so. But smart TV, I think it'll be dead within the next 2 years, as we know it. It's going to morph into something that like you say, is just another channel for content.
I think it already is doing that. I mean, I think that was what was game changing in a way about WebOS, was the idea of taking everything, regardless of what it is, and treating it as an app. So you had an HDMI one input, that's an app. You select that. Netflix, you select that, and that's great because you basically have your launcher bar. On your launcher bar, you have the HDMI inputs you're using, whichever sources you got connected. Netflix, Amazon, iPlayer, 4OD, all four, whatever it's called now. Those, and you put them in the list, in priority of which ones you use the most regularly, and that's all you really want, and everything else just sits at the end and never gets used.
Yeah, and like Mark alluded to right at the beginning of the conversation, if you want that type of thing, I think you're far better served, Mark, by buying a media box of some description and learning how to use that and putting Kodi on there and learning how to feed your content into that, maybe from a NAS drive or whatever, because there's so many options now for content delivery. And I think if you choose to go with a box solution, at least you've got a way out if things are not updated.
And you can take it into another room and use it on another TV, of course, which is another you can't do with a smart TV. You can have a bang up to date smart TV in the living room, but if your one in the bedroom's not up to snuff, then there's nothing you can do about it apart from plug a box in. Speaking from experience.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm doing that basically on the Kuro at the moment because clearly that has absolutely no smart platform.
So I think.
I'm not
Phil
sure.
Phil says it'll be dead.
I'm not sure it'll be dead altogether. It'll still
it would change.
No, hang on. I didn't say that. I said as we know it.
I know
it would die, and it would morph into something that's far more about content delivery than anything else. Talking about content delivery, talking about Netflix and so on, you did another little experiment, Mark. A quick yes or no: Netflix Ultra HD streaming or Full HD Blu-ray? What was better?
Neither.
I wasn't expecting that.
No, nothing really. It's so close in terms of video quality. There is so little in it you would see on an average size TV, let alone a big one like I was doing it with from a few feet away. I was using a 65-inch telly and I was getting within 3 or 4 foot to even slightly pick up a difference. It's there's just nothing in it as things stand. Really, you'd be really hard pressed on a good internet connection. With Netflix at the correct refresh rate, it's a match for Blu-ray for sure. In terms of audio, you can't do HD audio at the minute through Netflix, although most people that's not going to bother. You can do 5.1 Dolby Digital Plus, which will be enough for a lot of people. It's at this stage it's really hard to call it apart in terms of video quality. I will go down the Netflix route because I don't want to spend a lot of money on discs for TV shows, which is what I use it for. I don't use it for movies. I like the access, I like the interface. I don't like sticking discs in, all the rest of it. It's just convenience married with quality makes it the winner for me. But I perfectly appreciate people like the ceremony of getting a disc out and sticking it in. Steve?
Well, with movies, yeah, but I haven't bought a TV series with the notable exception of Game of Thrones, which I think is unique in terms of it's such a well-made show with such fantastic production values that you can buy that on Blu-ray and watch it over and over again. But with the exception of that, I haven't bought a TV show on Blu-ray or even any disc format in years. I just watch them on streaming services, same as you, because it's convenient and I'm unlikely to rewatch a TV series with the exception again of Game of Thrones. Whereas I will watch my favorite films over and over again. So yeah, for TV stuff, definitely streaming. And in fact, I was watching season 4 of House of Cards over the weekend, and even in full HD, I was stunned at how good it looked on Netflix. It looked incredible, even with my crappy internet connection. And
What's that through, Steve?
What device was I using?
Yeah,
I was using Apple TV.
Right. Okay.
And it looked absolutely stunning. I was thinking, if you told me that, well, this is a 4K stream, I could have believed it. I thought this is looking really good. Well, I was quite impressed, particularly the opening credit sequence. It always looks really impressive. But
on the converse side, I did compare 4K, which is a separate thing, I guess, of the Ultra HD Netflix to 1080p Netflix. Just flicking to the Roku I was using, I think, and it does murder full HD Netflix. It absolutely murders it for quality. There is a massive jump. You will see it straight away, just jumping from source to source.
Thank you, Mark, for
well, I just thought to point out the inadequacies if you're
crushing my.
But there is. I mean, but I agree with you, because I've watched 1080p streams, for many years from Netflix, and I've been impressed with a lot of them. But it is a big leap going up to the Ultra HD streams. A really big leap.
Right, do you want to chuck a grenade in now, then, Phil? And let's get down to the really hard tack stuff. Let's unleash Ed.
Okay, so
we're unleashing Phil first.
So, like I said, I promise you, I told you so, and I guess back in 2010, when 3D technology came along for TVs, I happened to say a couple of times that I didn't think it had the traction to become popular with the mass market. I thought it would be popular with the enthusiast market to a certain degree, but I thought in terms of the mass market, it wasn't going to work, and it wasn't going to work for quite a number of reasons, which you've actually listed in your Death of 3D TV article, Steve, on the homepage, which has caused quite a bit of a debate, really. But it seems to be quite a bit of a pointless debate. And once again, I'm in no way having a go at our listeners or our forum members tonight. But again, we're in a bubble, this bubble of enthusiasts and people who do like this technology. For the mass market, it's never been popular. It was never going to be popular. I said it again in 2012. And somebody who actually posts on AVForums, but also on AVSforums, called me all sorts of names, saying, who does this guy think he is, saying that 3D is not going to be popular, it's going to die, 3D TV is going to die, and all the rest of it. And I'm not going to say I told you so, but I think it's more or less come to the point now with Philips and Samsung both pulling out of 3D altogether on their TVs, with Panasonic only having 3 models with 3D, and I guess Sony are the same, 3 models with
two models
with 3D. Plus, the BBC withdrew their channel, Sky withdrew their channel last year. The only source of 3D content at the moment is Blu-ray, but even so, in the US, I believe that the market is even smaller than the UK in terms of what now gets released as a 3D Blu-ray. So there's very little content there. There's very little in terms of new technology coming along. The only sector that seems to be holding on to 3D is the projector market. And because they're going to struggle with HDR delivery and of course 4K delivery, because it's so expensive to manufacture 4K chips and so on, they need to hang on to a feature to sell projectors. And obviously on a big screen, it makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more immersive experience. But I think I was right calling it all the way back there and saying that I didn't think it was going to be particularly popular with the mass market, and I think that's proven to be the case. Take AVForums and AVS members aside, that is the case. I don't know anybody who watches 3D material at home on their 3D TV.
I've got to say, it's certainly out of everyone I know I've got one friend. I mean, don't say I've got one friend, because I've got more than one friend. But of my friends, only one of them is a fan of 3D at all, really, and B, regularly watches it on his TV. Even I'm a fan of 3D. It's ironic that I should be getting a lot of grief for writing that article, but I've always been a supporter of 3D. But to be honest, I've always been a supporter of 3D on a projector, because for it to be any kind of immersive experience, it needs to be on a very big screen. You just can't get that on a 40-inch screen. It's like looking through a small window. It's not the same thing at all. But I've always been a fan of it. The technology itself is incredible. I think that the fact that they can do that is really impressive. But once again, going back to the regular surveys that manufacturers do every year with all their customer base, even back in 2010, 2011. 3D was not coming a very high list of priorities. It was always down the bottom, and these days it's right at the bottom. It was never something. I think it was something people weren't actually asking for. It was just kind of foisted upon them because they could do it, and they needed some kind of feature to help sell TVs in a saturated market. Now everything's moved on to 4K and HDR, and it's just not important anymore, and people weren't interested in it anyway. And if it adds to the complexity of making the panel, or if it adds to the cost of making the panel anyway, and you're a manufacturer and margins are already razor thin, you're going to think, well, why am I bothering? And that's clearly what Samsung and Philips have thought. Even LG, apparently only 20% of their TVs are going to have 3D this year out of the entire lineup. So, they're all cutting back. If they haven't got rid of it entirely, they're getting rid of most of them. And I should imagine by next year, 3D TVs will be quite rare. New 3D TVs, should I say.
Yeah. I mean, I did make this point perhaps more than once in the accompanying thread. This is part of a wider situation we've encountered with the general public across both audio and video. You can bring the public round to improvements in quality, and it's not very hard to do, but it must actually demand nothing of them whilst you do it. So DVD quite happily usurped VHS. Yeah, it had a better picture quality, but equally you didn't have to rewind it or anything like that. HD has slowly but surely achieved a reasonable level of market penetration, because the channels have started turning up and it's not too hard to find them, and so on and so forth. That's all good. And I have reasonable hopes that over, I think, a longer time frame than might possibly be ideal, but nonetheless, eventually 4K and high dynamic range and other things will find their place as well, because for exactly the same reasons, if a group of friends sit down to watch a film in 4K HDR, there will be a couple of people who are technically up on it, and they will genuinely appreciate what they see in front of them. For the people that don't appreciate it, they're still just watching a film with their mates, and they can interject and throw popcorn at one another, all the rest of it. 3D just demanded a level of commitment and general interaction that we've seen time and time again the public isn't interested in doing. And yeah, this is an inevitable, as Phil said, this is an inevitable end, nothing more, nothing less. It just isn't compatible with how most people use these viewing systems at home.
I don't want to gloat in any way, because I think it's interesting technology. In certain instances it works really well. With a projector it works really well. With OLED TVs with passive 3D, 4K OLED TVs passive, it looks really, really good and really quite a compelling thing to watch. But the general public have to get on board, or we come back to the same situation that we did with the smart TV systems, which is manufacturers continually do market research. They have to do it because it's such a saturated market in terms of TV penetration, especially in the UK. Now, the UK is slightly different to other markets, especially in Europe, in that it has a bigger enthusiast draw, and it has more sales in the higher echelons of the TV lineups. More high-end models get sold in the UK than elsewhere, apart from maybe Germany, when it comes to Europe. You just have to look at the American market, which is an absolute drive to the bottom at the moment, with lots of manufacturers not even getting involved. Lots of big manufacturers not getting involved. So they have to look at things. They have to look at what is value for money, what's costing them money, what's actually being used by the general public. And for a long time, even getting review samples, I'm still chasing companies this week for 3D specs, because I can't fully test the product they've sent in for review, because they haven't included the specs, because they just see it as, it's just another feature. On this occasion, it's two projectors, which really, they need to be tested, so we need the glasses in. But, these manufacturers have looked at this, they've seen the market, they've seen the way things have gone, and the fact that the BBC, who are accountable to the taxpayer, have decided, well, it's not worth us spending any more money on this, we need to be moving on. And then you look at a company like Sky, who could keep a 3D channel going quite easily and absorb the costs into something else quite easily, but they too have pulled the plug. So unfortunately, whether we like it or not, and we as enthusiasts, like I say, there are, and we're not gloating about this, there are applications where 3D technology really does work, and there have been experiences I've had at home which I thought, Jesus, that looks really good, but not enough of them. And there's not enough momentum behind it, and the vast majority of stuff that's being produced now is all post-conversion. Very little is actually being filmed with 3D cameras, So it went from something that had showed great promise, but really at the end of the day, it came down to the glasses. And I still pretend that this is the main reason. You do so many different things in a living room. You do not sit and just look at the screen. You have other things going on. You're speaking to people. You've got pets climbing all over you. You might want to lie down, which you can't do if you're wearing 3D specs. You might have other things on the go. So you don't want to be sitting there wearing glasses. And there are, like I say, things that tie you to wearing the glasses. You have got to keep your head straight and all the rest of it. And maybe in a cinema room where you're sitting looking at a big screen and you are keeping yourself more or less sat straight, it works a bit better in those circumstances. But how many people have got a cinema room and a projector? Very little. When it comes to TV, unless they do away with the glasses, it's never something that's going to catch on to the mass market, ever.
You also need to really close the curtains as well, don't you? Because any reflections just kill 3D in the glasses. So that's another
all right,
barrier.
I was wondering what you were watching in 3D.
Well, anything that when the light catches the glasses, it kills the contrast and kills the effect to a certain extent.
It does,
so.
yeah. Yeah,
So
it does.
That's another barrier.
But it is a shame that we're getting to the point now where the technology is getting really, really good.
Yeah. They've just got now where it's particularly, as you said, Phil, with the 4K OLED TV, large screen OLED TV with passive 1080p for each eye. Honestly, it looks stunning. But, unfortunately, just as it's getting really, really good, it's gradually being dropped because there isn't just any interest. And going back to what you said, Phil, whenever, and I was quite evangelical about 3D in the early days, and would tell people, 3D is great. As soon as you told them you had to put glasses on, they'd have no interest. It was like, well, I'm not wearing glasses at home. They don't mind doing it in a cinema because, like you say, in the cinema, all you're doing is watching the film.
The cinema, it's an event.
People are prepared to do that. But in the lounge, you got lights on in the lounge. You're doing other things. You're watching TV. As you said, I think Ed, in one of your posts, if your wife walks in and wants to watch what you're watching, she has to sit down and put on a pair of 3D glasses. It's not going to happen. It just isn't. No one. To be honest, I don't think anyone really wanted that in their lounge. They never did, and they never will. And unless they can get auto stereoscopic 3D to work properly, which again, I mean, Phil, you've seen plenty of examples as well. I've never seen one that really works because as soon as you move your head, you lose the effect, and it starts giving you a headache. And obviously, let's not forget that quite a lot of people in the country and worldwide can't see 3D anyway. Probably there are more people who have, through various medical reasons, can't see a three-dimensional image the way that most people can, than there are fans of 3D. I can tell you that much. So,
burn.
Anyways, I mean, I bet statistically speaking, there's more people with one eye than there is fans of 3D. So, and that's, if you do have a problem with one of your eyes and you can't focus and get the 3D effect, there's immediately a non-starter for you. And even people that can, have healthy eyes still end up getting headaches. And if you watch, and I've done this, I've watched long periods of watching 3D, where I've watched like a couple of Hobbit movies in 3D back to back. Tell you, 6 hours of those glasses on, active shutter particularly, it's tiring and it will give you a headache. And you will have had enough by the end of it.
It's given me a hangover, an actual hangover. If you watched a 3D movie the night before, the next morning I would wake up with a raging headache every time.
I mean, I'm a fan of 3D, and even I've got to the point now where, for example, The Martian, which is a native 3D film, and I saw it at the cinema in 3D. I got the 3D Blu-ray, and I was about to put it on, and I thought, should I put on the 3D or the 2D? Sod it, I put on the 2D. I can't be arsed with the glasses. So, if I'm saying that, and I'm a fan, what chances has it got with the mass market?
Apparently none.
Okay, so things not looking rosy for 3D, and we'll obviously come back to this one and see where we are in the next 6 months, but I guess, the next lineup of TVs in 2017, I'll be very surprised if there's any 3D models, to be honest, unless they're really high-end OLED or whatever. You might still see it there. Because I guess the real test is going to be, and we've discussed this, Steve, is how's OLED going to look when they take the filler off? How's the B6 going to look? Which is not going to have 3D, so it's not going to have the 3D filler attached to it. So it's going to be interesting to see if that in any way affects the picture quality whatsoever. Yeah,
it is. I mean, when they announced the B6 at CES, I remember thinking like, that's an interesting TV, because for a lot of people, even people like me who are perhaps fans of 3D, might have a 3D projector. So the idea of a non-3D OLED for the lounge, flat screen and everything, that's looking quite tempting. So it'll be very interesting to see how it does perform when we finally get one in for review.
I'm interested. I mean, admittedly, I probably can't afford it without doing something irresponsible, but I am nonetheless. That would be my ideal television from this generation.
Another drunk purchase by Ed on that one, I think.
I'd have to be I'd have to be so drunk I could no longer use a computer. So I'm actually quite safe from that. I should be all right.
I like to think though that by dropping the filter, by not having the expensive stands or built-in speakers and all that sort of stuff that the higher end models have got in this year's LG range, we should see it hitting a competitive price point, which should be good news for everyone, really.
Okay, well, that wraps up the hardware side of the podcast for this week. We'll be back in a sec with movies reviews. Okay, moving on to movies, and what can we go and see this Friday, Steve?
Well, interesting one this Friday, actually. 10 Cloverfield Lane, which is a film that, in this modern age of the internet and everything, I don't know how they managed to do this, but it's a film that they've managed to make in almost entire secrecy, that no one knew was being produced, that no one knew had been made until about 2 months ago when the first trailer hit. It's a kind of sequel to the film Cloverfield, which again was a film that was made in quite a lot of secrecy by J.J. Abrams. I think he was the producer on Cloverfield back in 2008. And this is a film, I think, if you've seen Cloverfield, it's like a found footage film about a monster attack in New York. And this is meant to be following on from that, so maybe post-monsters attack or something like that. But I'm not quite sure what it involves because, again, the trailer is fairly ambiguous. But I'm just amazed that they can make an entire feature film with a big cast. I mean, John Goodman's in it, and Mary Elizabeth
Winstead?
Yeah, Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
She's welcome to join my selective.
I might be stuck in a solo with her for a bit. She... I mean, these are relatively big stars, and it's produced by J.J. Abrams again, and somehow they've managed to make this film without anyone knowing about it. Which, congratulations, that's quite a feat these days. So I don't know much about the plot, and that's deliberate. The trailers have been fairly ambiguous. It opens on Friday. I am curious, and I kind of enjoyed, although I'm not a fan of found footage films generally. I kind of enjoyed Cloverfield. So, and this is not a found footage film, by the way. This is shot normally. I'm curious, and I think if I get a chance this weekend, I might go and see it. And the other film opening up this weekend is a comedy with Bill Murray called Rock the Kasbah, where he is a DJ in the Middle East, I believe, or a musician, so I say, in the Middle East. So if you like a bit of Bill Murray, might be worth checking that out. But I think for me, 10 Cloverfield Lane, I'm really curious to see what they've done and how they've, what it's all about. So it's piqued my interest.
Yeah, well, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what it's like. But, JJ's great at the first two acts, and the third act always stinks.
Oh, yeah, he does. He has issues with third acts, definitely. It's Super 8 being the best example of that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I loved that film right up until the third act.
Yeah, first 2/3 of that, fantastic. I love the Spielberg homage. The kids are really good. Had lots of interesting stuff going on, and then in the last, he tries to have his cake and eat it at the end, and it just ends up with cake all over its face.
I'll tell you what I ended up watching at the weekend, and I forgot how much I loved the film and how well made it was. Poltergeist.
Oh,
it's on Amazon at the minute, and I just happened to see it, and I thought, I'll watch the first 5 minutes, and 2 hours later, credits rolling. I forgot how superb that film was.
It's still scary.
Oh yes, it is.
It is. It is. It's. That's. I mean, that did not need to be remade. They nailed it the first time out.
All right, Steve. So I've been buying loads of Blu-rays recently, and I'm hooked. I need to go and buy some more.
Actually, you've even been buying 3D Blu-rays, which I find quite amusing.
Yeah, but they've also got the Blu-ray version inside the box, and they were like £4 a piece. So I wasn't going to say no. But what can I buy this week if I feel like it?
Right. Well, as you mentioned at the top of the show, Game of Thrones season 5 comes out on Blu-ray this week with a Dolby Atmos soundtrack. So that's the big release this week. Basically,
really expensive. It's the same price as what I paid for season 1 to 4.
It's $29.99, isn't it?
Well, it was 30-something quid.
I think on Amazon it's $29.99. But to be fair, HBO series are never that cheap. They are a bit toppy price-wise. But I do think you're getting value for money in the sense that you're getting 10 episodes with high production values, fantastic picture and sound. I mean, if you read Simon's review, as with all the seasons of Game of Thrones on Blu-ray, they look and sound stunning. They are cinematic in terms of their production values. The money's up there on the screen, and I watch these Blu-rays in the home cinema because they can stand up to being projected onto a big screen and still look fantastic. So I don't mind. I don't really object to paying a bit extra for these. And like I said earlier, it's the only TV series I buy on Blu-ray now because of that. So if you're interested, and I'm sure there are plenty of fans out there, people who will buy it, it comes out this week. And obviously the new series starts it's in April, isn't it, Mark? I think it's either the 11th or the 18th that it first starts broadcasting on Sky. on Sky Atlantic. So not long to wait until season 6. And yeah, there was some shockers at the end of season 5, I have to say. So as always, so I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in season 6.
I hope it's better than season 5, because season 5 felt like 4.5 to me. It was I was quite let down. It never seemed to go anywhere from season 4. We kind of left at the same point almost as you were at the end of season 4. But anyway, and I also think that big shocker at the end of season 5.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, when that's talking about spoilers and stuff, maybe we should.
I'm not going to say anything about what the shocker is. I'm just saying I was very shocked. It did bugger up Ed's theory.
No, I don't.
I don't. Look, I don't want to know. I've got.
Thanks to again another just the simple appearance of a person in that episode prior to the shocking event meant that actually it wasn't terribly shocking at all. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Anyway, Game of Thrones is out this week. Next week, you can get on Blu-ray Steve Jobs, the Danny Boyle film with Michael Fassbender about obviously Steve Jobs.
Is it any good?
I watched it at the weekend and really enjoyed it. In fact, you know what? It's 2 hours long, and I've got to say that 2 hours shot by, because typical Aaron Sorkin. There's loads and loads of talking and lots going on all the time, and it rattled along. And I couldn't believe that 2 hours had gone in the blink of an eye. I really enjoyed it. And I thought my only complaint being, whilst Michael Fassbender is really good, he's a great actor, he just doesn't look anything like Steve Jobs. Whereas maybe not such a good actor, but Ashton Kutcher really did look like him. So you're always aware it's Michael Fassbender acting, and you never kind of buy into him being Steve Jobs. But the structure is interesting. It takes place basically in a period of time before 3 key launches: the Macintosh launch, the Next launch, and then finally the iMac launch. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. Black Mass is out next week. Saw that on the plane when we were going to Vegas. Phil, I think you saw it, didn't you, on the way back?
Yeah, I did. It's something that I didn't mind watching on a 7-inch screen, but I thought it was trying to be a bit too worthy.
Yeah, it was. I thought Johnny Depp, for once, for first time in a long time, gave a decent performance. But it's one of those films that's about some pretty unlikable people, and it makes it difficult to really, associate or empathise with the characters.
Yeah, I also thought again, third act was a bit sloppy. Yeah.
Well, apparently it was quite cut. A good 20 minutes was cut out of that third act, because there's a whole bit where he goes on the run that basically just jumps from that to him being caught.
It just felt really rushed and really just thrown together. Yeah, so which was a shame, because up to that point I thought drama wise and performance wise it was really good. But like you say, I mean, it's characters you don't necessarily like, but I think that works dramatically if a lot of care and respect is taken in telling the story, and you have a character that you can pin to as the good guy. The problem was they were all bad guys.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, you can make films where the characters aren't nice. I mean, no one's particularly nice in Goodfellas, but it still works because it's a really well made, really well structured film. I think Black Mass probably, because it's, I don't know, it definitely lost its way in the third act. Also next week, The Good Dinosaur, Pixar's second film last year after Inside Out. Haven't seen it. I have got it actually on 3D Blu-ray, but I haven't seen it yet.
Oh dear me, it's a 9 you don't buy.
Well, I've got every Pixar movie, but it didn't look particularly good, I have to say. So this is definitely one of those purchases where I'm just doing it to keep my collection intact. And also coming out next week is The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2, which I have seen at the cinema, which was a pretty good conclusion to the Hunger Games series. I quite enjoyed it, actually. And if you're a Hunger Games fan, I'm sure you'll, but if you haven't already seen it, I'm sure you'll enjoy watching that on Blu-ray. And that's it for next week.
So you mentioned Goodfellas, classic, absolute classic film. I only saw that about 7 years ago for the first time, believe it or not. I'm one of these people who, I don't know, I just tend to forget to watch the really worthy films. And if you take a look at the AFI 100 years top films, I think it's top 100 films, and I have seen 49% of those films on that list. And when you go down the list, I was quite ashamed of myself, because the ones that I've guaranteed have seen are the Spielbergs, the Alfred Hitchcocks, the blockbusters, basically. Now I have seen a few of the classic films in there, but there are titles which I am ashamed to say, worthy films as they are, stuff like Raging Bull, and I saw it for £4 the other day, and I nearly bought it in Blu-ray, and I really should go and buy it in Blu-ray and watch it. Never seen it. Stuff like, what was the one I bought the other day? I've never seen it. Taxi Driver. I've never seen Taxi Driver. There's other stuff in there like The Searchers, never seen it. Heard all about it, but it's one of these things I've never gotten round to watching. And there's other stuff in there that I've seen bits and pieces of. So The Graduate, I have seen that, but I can't really remember much of it. But I know I've seen it. It's a Wonderful Life. It was on the TV every Christmas, so I think everybody on the planet's seen that. The interesting, obviously, fact about that film is that it absolutely bombed.
Quite a few films on this list.
Yeah,
didn't do that well when they first came
It
out.
absolutely bombed, and it changed Capra completely. I mean, I don't think he ever recovered from it. Again, stuff like that, you've seen it over and over and over again. But there's other stuff on the list, and stuff that, like I say, I am actually quite ashamed that I haven't seen a lot of these things, like the Maltese Falcon, The Bridge over River Kwai. Never seen it. I've never actually gone round to seeing it. Doctor Strangelove. Never seen it.
You see, at least I have
that's
seen.
Terrible.
Can't watch that.
Actually, I'm quite surprised.
Really,
in that
really
case,
funny.
weird to relate. Of your 49%, actually, I think it may be that I've seen the other 51, but there are films there that I haven't seen.
Yeah.
Obviously, as you might expect, as you know, we've established that I've gone through life without watching large swathes of vital stuff. But no,
Jaws, one of the films you haven't seen.
No, I've never seen Jaws.
Oh, it's an absolute classic, Ed. You'd really like it. You really would like it.
It's on my list of things to do.
It's not about the shark. I think you'd like it. But yeah, I mean, I know exactly what you're saying there, because there's many times... there's a lot of these films I actually own, but I've never watched. And some of them on DVD, which I have owned and then sold on and never watched them. Can I admit now, Ed, to Apocalypse Now?
To be honest,
You've never
that's
seen
so
Apocalypse
long.
Now?
It's such a long film.
I have it. I have all the editions of it on Blu-ray. It's still sitting in the cellophane.
I mean, and just to be really annoying, in order for it to make any degree of sense the first time out, you probably need to watch the Redux version, which is even bloody longer.
That's the one I've got.
Yeah.
But I don't watch that one. That's not very good. It ruins key aspects of that film, I think.
Right.
I completely disagree. Without the French plantation scene, none of the rest of it makes any sense.
Right. Well, let's not get into spoilers again. But those are some of the ones. But obviously, there are ones like Citizen Kane, The Godfather, Casablanca, Singing in the Rain, Gone with the Wind, Lawrence of Arabia, Schindler's List, Vertigo, Wizard of Oz, all these things, Psycho, 2001: Space Odyssey. You know, there are big, worthy classic films that I have seen on the list. But I will put my hands up and say I haven't seen them all. I don't pretend to see them all. And I'm also going to say a lot of them don't really inspire me to go and watch them right away. So, you know, I guess I'm not going to be the only one here. I mean, I know Steve's going to probably be the highest scorer here, but I'd be surprised if Mark scores that much higher than me.
I got 60%, which was 62, I think. I went through the list on Friday and looked, which surprised me that I've seen that many. But then I did used to watch a lot of movies, and I just kind of fell out of it about 10 years ago. Coincidentally, when I had a child, perhaps that's that had something to do with it. I did used to watch a fair few movies. And I used to buy Empire even, you know, for a while, for a couple of years. So I was quite into movies for a while, and I guess I might have chased down some of these classics, you know.
I've got to be honest. I mean, some of these films, not only have I not seen them, I was unaware of their existence.
Yeah, there's a few like that. For sure.
There's a few. I mean, it must have said some of the 30s and 20s. I mean, City Lights. I haven't the faintest idea what City Lights is, and I've never
Charlie
seen.
Chaplin.
Fine, good for him.
Yeah, the general, obviously, Buster Keaton, that's kind of quite obscure. Well, not obscure, but unlikely to people who have seen that. There's a few of the really old stuff, but most of it's fairly classic.
If you've not seen The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, I would recommend watching that. That's one of my favourites.
That's a great film.
Okay.
It's an amazing movie.
I guess we hit on this before as well, and we all tend to be round about the same age group here, apart from Steve, who's far older than the rest of us. Sorry, Steve, but it is true.
I don't think I'm much older than Mark, am I?
No. I just look younger.
I was sticking. Yeah, you do, Mark. I was just sticking up for you there. But I guess if we were to show this list to the 20-somethings at the minute, I guess you'd probably be 15%, 20%. I mean, I'm just surmising, but I would imagine that is the case, because looking through this list, there's not a lot from the last 20 years that's in there.
There's nothing from this century, as best as I can see.
But this was made in 2007.
No, sorry, Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, 2001. I think that's the most recent film on this list, and that's not a very good one. It's not a glowing endorsement.
Yeah, I mean, there are some really good films in this list, but like you were saying, there's stuff. There is stuff that does interest me. Network interests me.
Very prescient movie.
I've heard a lot about it, and I understand it's still quite relevant in its message today. So that is something if it pops up on Blu-ray at £4, I'll buy it.
I'm intrigued by Intolerance, not least because it's 100 years old.
Yeah.
And going by the title, you'd probably enjoy it, Ed.
Yeah, well, it's
3D.
Yeah, but I guess, I mean, going through the list here, you've got all the ones that you would expect to see in here, like The Wild Bunch, All the President's Men, Forrest Gump, In the Heat of the Night, Silence of the Lambs, Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, Shawshank, Saving Private Ryan, Clockwork Orange, which I think is I don't think it gets its just rewards. Clockwork Orange. I think because of the whole video nasty thing, I think it got a wrong label or wrongly labelled there, Steve. I think it's another one which still rings true right now.
Oh,
a lot of the messages.
That's one of the reasons why I think it rings true now. I think it was very close to the bone in 71, was it when it came out? 71. Because the reason it was unavailable in this country was nothing to do with censorship. It was Kubrick himself who asked Warner Brothers to move it in the UK because he was getting death threats.
Yeah.
Which is shocking that could happen at the time. But the film is still an incredibly powerful film to watch, and even now, partly I think because of Kubrick's trademark cold style. It's so detached that you feel like you're implicit in some of the violence in the film. It just puts you there in the room with them.
It's got a great score as well.
Yeah,
really, really
it's amazing
score.
work.
Yeah.
And it is, incredible to think that he had so much sway over Warner Brothers, he could get them to withdraw an entire film from circulation in an entire country until after his death. Amazing. But what was your mark? 49, did you say, out of 100, Phil?
Yeah, but actually, I'm saying that, but I probably have seen more than that, but I just don't remember it.
And you reckon you were 62? Were you
62 for certain? Query 64. Could have seen a couple of them.
And Ed was 50.
What was Ed?
Ed was 52.
No, I don't. I haven't counted exactly, but I would say somewhere about high 40s, low 50s.
So come on then, Steve.
I'm at 83. I've seen 83 of the 100, so not too bad. There's a few there that I haven't seen. I'm aware of them, but can't say that I'm a big Chaplin fan for a kickoff. Right. And at least 2 of the films in that list are Chaplin, or 3.
I was really surprised at how few Hitchcocks have actually made it into this list.
It's funny, Hitchcock never got much critical acclaim. Certainly when he was making films, he was always regarded too populist. It's interesting that in the last couple of years, because for years and years and years and years and years, Citizen Kane was always selected as the best film of all time, until 2 years ago when Vertigo replaced it. This was a critics, they do an annual critics selection of, worldwide critics selection of the best film of all time. And for years it was always Citizen Kane. And 2 years ago, Vertigo was voted the best film ever made. And so it's only now that Hitchcock is really getting the kind of critical acclaim that, frankly, he always deserved.
There's 3 now.
So sadly, yeah. One of those, along with Kubrick, directors who never won an Oscar.
Yeah, but what do the Academy know?
Yeah, quite well. that's a whole other story, isn't it? But I think this is a pretty decent list of films. I mean, obviously, it's very much because it's the AFI, so they're all US films, aren't they?
They are. I mean, it'd be interesting to have a look at some other top 100 lists, like the Film 4 one. That'd be interesting to have a look at Channel 4's all-time favourite list. That'd be interesting because I think that would more UK-centric in terms of taste, and I think it'd be a bit more up-to-date than this one. I mean, I'm not saying that older films don't deserve all the awards that they do get. I love cinema. It's just there are things that I will put my hand up and say I've never gotten around to seeing them. And if I had the time, I probably would. And I think time's the thing, isn't it? I mean, there would have been a time a few years ago where I maybe would have made, I'm saying a few years ago, probably about 10 years ago, where I would have made a point of actually sitting down and trying to catch up with some of these worthy titles that I haven't seen. And who knows, I mean, there's so many good things now on Blu-ray. I mean, we're all talking about Ultra HD Blu-ray and all the rest of it, but if you actually look at Amazon and other places and some of the Blu-ray titles and some of the classic Blu-ray titles, you're picking them up for £3-4. Even 3D Blu-rays. I think I picked up Star Trek the other day, and I picked up, that's a new Star Trek, Into Darkness. And what else was it? It was something else new. Oh, Man of Steel, because you'd all been talking about Man of Steel. I thought I'll go and get that. And I paid all of £8 for both of those, and they're both 3D Blu-rays. We're all talking about the next format. Well, there's plenty to watch on the existing formats at the minute, and some
that's true.
Give me a good opportunity to catch up with some of these that I've never seen.
I think that Withers needs to compile the 100 worst films as rated on IMDb, and we'll see how many of those we've watched, because I think the answer is, in the case of my wife, a worryingly large number of them.
Yeah, but has your wife actually sat down and experienced the film that is Whoopi Goldberg again?
Do you know what? I think she refused to be drawn on this, but I have a sneaking suspicion that Kirsty has at some point seen Theodore Rex.
Once watched, you can never forget it.
Well, yes, but
You
you
can
can
never
deny it.
undo that.
So
I still
yeah.
can't believe you fell for it and actually sat and watched it and reviewed it.
I don't know. I'll tell you what, it is worth watching because it's one of those films that's so bad it starts.
Yeah,
to become quite
as I
funny.
say,
The
once
sight of Whoopi Goldberg, who can barely move in that outfit, trying to pick something up from the ground, is worth it alone. And she sort of tries to bend with that because she can't move her back, which is what I can only describe as a giant girdle to hold her in, because obviously she's in and this has never been allowed in the first place, a skin tight outfit. It's and the look on her face half the time when she's basically just being forced to do this, it's worth it for that alone. Although Laura did walk out of the lounge, she refused after 5 minutes. She said, I'm not watching any more of this. Life's too short.
Oh, you only watched it in the lounge. You didn't actually put it in the home cinema.
No.
Said with the horror in his voice there. Talking about films that you have fond memories of and then you watch them again. Bad Boys. I had to buy the US box because the Sony screwed up the Region B release, because Bad Boys wasn't the 20th anniversary edition in the UK box. They'd done it with the older disc for that. So anyway, I bought the US one. And Bad Boys, I sat and watched it. I've watched it a couple of times now because I've been testing different projectors, so I wanted the same bit of material. And it hasn't aged well. Did we really dress as badly as that in the 90s? And furniture as well. There's a lot of furniture in there. I'm thinking, oh Christ, I had one of them. And there was pillowcases, and they had that like Miami design. Do you remember them from the 90s? And I'm thinking,
Loosely.
oh God, I used to have a bedding like that, and it really hasn't aged well. Apart from the Porsche that's in it, I think everything else has aged quite badly. I mean, you wouldn't want to see Will Smith with his shirt open these days with his six pack and all the rest. I mean, that seemed to be the thing. It was how little clothing that the male leads were.
It's quite
wearing.
warm in Miami.
Yeah, but it seemed to be the male leads that were losing the clothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a lesson actually borne out by any number of films across the decades. If you are achingly of the moment in fashion and design terms, it is highly likely you're going to look like a monumental dick in 10 years' time. That's not specific to Bad Boys. That must follow us across every generation.
If you pick something like trying to think of Wall Street, for example.
Yeah,
that is very much a film of its time. The stuff that's going on in that film, the clothes they're wearing, the Daryl Hannah's interior design is awful.
And when I was busy
awful.
trying not to die yesterday, there was one of the airport movies on a long way down the Sky Dial, and there was some fairly bold clothing choices being used in that as well.
Yeah.
So for every Steve McQueen, a timeless fashion icon. And also, let's not forget, when you go, oh yeah, Steve McQueen, he's cool. Every time you try and dress like Steve McQueen, you look like someone going off to visit your gran.
But somehow McQueen can always carry it off.
Yeah, absolutely. So being timeless isn't that easy. But generally speaking, don't be exactly of the moment.
The most depressing thing was that how young Will Smith and Martin Lawrence look in that film. They look like teenagers. They're so young in that, and you just realise you're getting old.
Imagine how old they're going to look in Bad Boys 3.
I don't know.
I wonder if Martin Lawrence will still get top billing.
Yeah, I've still got on a Bad Boys 2. I can't even remember the plot of Bad Boys 2, actually. It's completely gone.
It's largely a relevant film.
Is it? Okay.
It's just a massive bunch of shoot-ups and car chases.
But I have now found the ultimate test scenes for DIs, dynamic irises, and that is the credit sequence of Bad Boys and then the heist at the beginning of the movie, because it takes place in such dark surroundings, but there's lots of bright white and just bits where this Sony that I'm testing in a minute is strobing away in the high dynamic iris setting because it's changing so often. So I think I found a real torture test there, so at least something positive comes out of that.
Is that going in the cons column? Not good with Bad Boys 2.
There's a bit when they're singing bad boys, what you going to do? And he goes, I don't know the second verse. We only ever usually sing the first one. Actually, I've got to say they are guilty pleasures of mine. I do think they're quite funny.
It was just how dated they are, Steve. I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting the nostalgia.
20 years, mate. It's long. That's when you realise we're getting on a bit, because 20 years is quite a long time. It's like if you extrapolate back from 1995, we're talking 1975 in Jaws. So, yeah, it was a long time ago now. Different century even.
And on that,
podcast as cheerily as we began.
Yeah, well, we started on death. We talked about death as really in the middle, and why not end on death? It's
to kill myself.
It's death edition.
It's coming for us all.
Anyway, on that death bombshell, that is the end of the podcast for this week. My thanks to Steve Withers.
Skadoosh.
Mark Hodgkinson.
This will be easier than I thought.
Put some passion into it.
I don't know. I've never seen it. All right. I don't know how to act this bit. This will be easier than I thought.
And Ed Selley.
There are no accidents.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and video, and of course you can leave us a rating on iTunes, and next week we'll read your name out if you do that. So go to iTunes now, give us 5 stars, nothing less than 5 stars will do. I'm Phil Hinton, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.